2016, a year of upstarts. Just 6 months ago, a rank outsider was on top in UK football. A rank outsider was launching a publicity tour in the US. And a rank insider was announcing his political suicide. Brexit. No, it's not the term for that moment in Euro 2016 when all the British teams are eliminated. It's the referendum for UK independence from the European Union. And, in fact, if England can somehow stay in Euro 2016 until the 23rd of June, that might be the best chance for Britain to stay in the EU, because most of the pro-Brexit voters will still be in France, making their homeland proud. Welcome to a special episode of United States of Europe. Now, we've been experimenting with sending cameras to different parts of the world, and this week we figure out who are these British people so desperate to get out of the European Union. We sent our cameras to the streets of Manchester in the middle of Britain to find out. And we did find a number of people who are not very positive about the EU.
Vote no to the EU. Kick them all out.
Based on these guys, I guess a lot of people on the street in Manchester want to leave the EU. But hey, you be the judge. We asked people to name 3 nice things about the EU.
I like the fact that I can use euros in more than one country, especially when I travel.
I like the fact that it feels like we're all sharing something that we can all move around. And, you know, I know people talk about people coming to Britain, but a lot of British people go and spend time in Europe. A lot of people study in Europe, so I think it's nice to have that sort of shared experience.
Yeah.
Because we're an island, and I think sometimes we feel a bit separate.
Yeah, I've got friends who've just moved to Berlin because of his job, and you wouldn't obviously be able to do that easily if we weren't. So it's quite cool that we can.
Well, that was quite positive. And in fact, most of the people that we talked to were so positive about the EU. And hey, this was before all those Manchester United fans took off to France for Euro 2016. We also asked what people thought might happen if the UK leaves the EU.
I don't think I would support that idea because what if people from the EU trying to go outside the EU as well? They wouldn't want the same thing to happen to them, would they? So again, I don't think it's a good idea.
It's kind of dangerous as well if we leave because there'd be less things to stop us doing what we want, if that makes sense.
Wow. So contrast that sentiment with the statements from politicians like Boris Johnson, who has said that Brussels' overreach is comparable to Germany under Hitler. Now, Boris and his hair are well known for their attention-seeking and self-serving flair. Some say bearing a strong resemblance to a certain American politician. But I think that's just clearly not the case. I think Boris bears more of a resemblance to another American, Gary Busey, or more accurately, the creature formerly known as Gary Busey. Gah. Now, another driving force behind the Brexit campaign is Nigel Farage of the UK Independence Party, a party whose colors are as exotic as the skin tones of the people he wants to keep out of the UK.
My thought on Nigel Farage is he's bigoted and he's racist, basically, and he's a danger.
I personally don't like him because I'm Romanian, and the only time I felt really like, hatred against me because I'm Romanian, it's because of him.
I can see him being running number 10 Downing Street.
And then there are these 2 guys that we showed you before. Now, in keeping with the pro-Brexit theme of blatant misinformation, we made it look like they were pro-Brexit. But, in fact, here's what they had to say about Nigel Farage.
I'm personally completely against his whole view. I think that's just the reason why I enjoy living here so much is because there's such a wide, kind of vast spectrum of people here. You can walk down there now and you can find different, people who've come from Italy or Pakistan or anywhere, stuff like that. I think that's part of the reason why Britain is such kind of a cool place, basically. And I think if we, took that kind of Donald Trump, kind of outlook on things, I think it would get boring here.
So why is Farage doing so well in the polls?
I think people that he's appealing to don't really have that kind of outlook in kind of small pockets outside of, well, the city and stuff. I mean, we read, crap media and stuff. Well, what I think anyway, the Daily Mail and the Express and all this kind of stuff.
Ah, that's a good point. There are certain UK newspapers that keep running headlines, rather sensationalist headlines like these. Clearly not aimed at the higher educated classes. And when Oscar-winning actress Emma Thompson joins many artists in making their case for staying in the EU, here's how The Sun replied, "Shut your cake hole." Clearly the pinnacle of educated discourse. Yes, you can tell it is an ironclad argument because photoshopping a piece of cake into someone's mouth could never be duplicated and used on someone else. Now, to be fair, the Brexit camp do have a point that membership in the EU can seem rather expensive.
£60 million a week.
And that's exactly the argument of the so-called brains behind Brexit, Conservative Justice Secretary Michael Gove. His performances in televised debates have been so strong and clearly not influenced by those tabloid newspapers, except for The Sun publisher Rupert Murdoch, with whom Gove is reportedly quite close, and with the Daily Mail, whose publisher is also quite close with Gove. His name is Lord Rothermere. So no, the UK doesn't want these elitists in Brussels telling them what to do, but elitists like a man named Lord Rothermere, that's okay. Lord Rothermere. Could you sound any more evil? I know it's not his real name, it's just his title. I'm sure his friends call him Voldemort.
Costs us something like 60 million a week or something to be in the EU. That 60 million can be paid for homeless and hospitals and stuff like that.
Now that's a good point about the homeless shelters and hospitals. Hospitals like the ones provided by the National Health Service, which the current British government is trying to get rid of. And homeless shelters, because David Cameron is famous for helping the homeless. But wait, didn't David Cameron just spend a whole year making sure that the UK wasn't spending so much money anymore? I mean, didn't he make sure that the EU was putting more into the UK than the other way around?
They funded a lot of things in Manchester as well, and they've got funds for infrastructure forthcoming, and I don't want that to be taken out of the city.
And in the category, what has the EU ever done for us? In Manchester alone, the EU has funded a tram system, museums, and in case you think that's too elitist, they've also funded council homes with cheaper heating bills, something called Sport City, and even a national football museum. So in fact, Brussels stands a better chance of building you a homeless shelter than London does.
Kick them all out.
Yes, kick them all out, except for that billionaire Australian whose motive for leaving the EU is that in Downing Street they do what he says and in Brussels they pay him no mind. You know, at this point it looks like the misinformation campaign and Rupert Murdoch and the whole Brexit camp, they may be winning. Fine. That's just tough luck for all the Brits living in the EU. In fact, there are an estimated 2.2 million British people who are currently living somewhere in Europe, including those retirees in the south of Spain. So with that in mind, we asked Manchester, what if all those EU expats have to come home from Europe?
Manchester's quite a big kind of homeless area, and I think we are going to run out of space eventually.
I think, the bigger issue is more the housing shortage than actual immigration.
I don't know, but I'm more worried about people that are in places that are getting bombed, like Syria, and what's going to happen to them if they, when they leave, rather than, well, there's obviously some cases, but rather than someone having, a glass of wine and a 3-course meal in Spain somewhere, it's a bit different.
That would be a disaster because UK is lack of space and hospitality now. If they have to come back to the UK, there will be no space for them to live. So where would they live?
Where will they put them? Scotland.
So there's no choice, pro-Brexit voters. If you vote to leave the EU, you're just going to have to give your spare room to one of these guys. Or sure, send them to Scotland. And after the UK exits the EU, we'll look forward to Scotland finally exiting the UK. For United States of Europe, I'm Greg Shapiro, making fun of EU the American way.
Newsroom, it's a newsroom. Listen to the sound of the newsroom. Anything can happen in a newsroom. News, 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 news.